Hi, everybody. It's Carol Marrock at carolmarrock.com. Welcome to Solo and Smart, my YouTube channel. And today I'm interviewing Jeanette Leardi. And Jeanette is a writer. She's also an editor, community educator, and a public speaker. And her background is social gerontology. She has a passion for older adults, especially around the topic of empowerment. She also finds a personal fulfillment helping boomers and older generations identify and share their wisdom with others. And her decade of experiences as a primary caregiver, which we have in common, to both her parents, inspired her to inspired her her encore career goals of changing perceptions about aging process and helping people appreciate elders' inherent dignity, wisdom, and unique value as mentors and catalysts for social change. Well, welcome, Jeanette. So good to have you.
Thank you, Carol. It's great to be here.
I love the fact that that you challenge us, because I need challenging also, on how we think about growing older ourselves and about that term aging, which I don't particularly care for anyway. I don't like that term aging, but it's a fact. We are getting older. But why do you, I just want to talk about why, I guess as a society or maybe as a person, how we might have grown up with the thought that aging is a bad thing.
Well, that's the fundamental question. Why in our society do we think aging is bad? Aging is not bad. Actually, we have a very skewed idea of aging. Aging is a natural process. We're supposed to do it. So if you're aging, you're doing it right, because this is what our bodies are supposed to do. It happens to all of us. So there's no way to get away from aging, at least not yet. I know scientists are working on that. But for now, we should be concentrating on the quality of our lives. And if we see aging as a good thing, then there's so many ways in which we can improve the quality of our life. We just need to get that idea straight in our heads that aging is a good thing. So in our society, we tend to value anything that's young and new and improved over anything that's older, traditional, tried and true. And we don't have to look far to see all the elements of that. We have there are lots of ageist jokes. If you listen to late night TV shows, you'll hear the hosts make lots of ageist jokes. It's as if we're afraid of getting older. So it comes from a fear of getting older. If we can get rid of the fear, we can see aging in a whole new light. And it can be something that we ourselves can benefit from, and then the rest of society can benefit from, because there's so many good things about aging.
I agree. I totally agree. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what do you see and what do you recommend to others in terms of changing our perspective from the fear of aging to the benefits and the value of aging?
Okay, well, first, let's talk about the assets of aging. There are good things about getting older. There are good things about being every age. There's good things about being a kid. There are good things about being a teenager, a middle-aged person. There are good things about being older. So here are some of the assets of aging. First of all, we have broader experience because we've lived longer, sharper skills in a certain way, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because our brains do change as we get older, but they change in some ways. We lose some capacity, but we gain others. So we have some sharper skills, and we have greater wisdom if we apply what we have experienced in our lives in a positive way. So that's one of the assets. But we also have greater individuation. In other words, as we get older, we become more different from one another. You know, when people use the term the elderly, that lumps us all into one group as if we're all alike. But the reality is, as we go through life, we have experiences, and those experiences lead us to make certain choices, and those lead us to other experiences. So we become more different from one another. So there's a greater variety of experience among older adults than there are among children, no matter how children may differ to begin with. We have another asset is we have a closer proximity to mortality. We know that there are fewer years ahead of us than behind us, and that makes us treat time in a different way. We can see time is more precious, and so we don't want to waste our time. We don't want to spend our time doing things that we know we don't like or we won't benefit from. So we get more choosy as we get older, and rightfully so. And then we have different motives and life purpose, which I can talk about in a second. And we have a different brain, which I can talk about in a second. And finally, we have strength in numbers. The world, not only our country, but the world in general is growing older because people are living longer. So by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. By 2060, it's going to be 1 in 4. So our planet is getting older because we're living longer. And there's so much human capital in older adults that we can really be harnessing all the gifts that we have to improve our planet. So those are the assets of aging. That's the good stuff about getting older. I mentioned that we have, that our brains change. So one of the things that changes in our brain is if you keep your brain healthy and engaged, you actually build more connections between the brain cells in your brain than you did when you were in your 30s or 40s. You can have trillions more connections in your head. And what that means is you have greater access to information. And we also have better long-term memories because we have more pathways, more connections to get to that information. So there are some deficits as we get older. For example, as we get older, our reaction times slow down a little bit. So our speed of processing slows down. We also may have a little trouble multitasking, doing more things at once than we did when we were younger, because younger brains are hardwired to say, what's next? What's next? I got to keep moving. But the positive side of how our brains change is that as we get older, we can stay on a task longer if we're not distracted than we could when we were younger. So we can spend hours on a task, whereas when we were younger, we'd have less patience to do that. So that's another brain skill that we have.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question about that. Was that a part of your study as a gerontologist about the brain and making more connections? Really?
Absolutely.
Wow.
This is the stuff people don't know about. We all are familiar with what's not so great about getting older. You know, my eyes are going, my hearing is going, but we don't hear the good stuff. And the good stuff is there are tons of scientific studies that show how our brains can develop certain positive skills because they do change. Now you got to keep your brain healthy. That's the main thing, and engaged. But for example, here's my favorite thing to talk about. As we get older, we have 2 hemispheres, a left and a right hemisphere, and they actually don't touch in the brain except for a little bridge of tissue in the middle called the corpus callosum. That corpus callosum, we're born with that little very thin bridge, but as we get older and it gets to its point of maturity, it gets to be a really thick bridge of like 200 to 250 million nerve fibers. That allows us to think more, use our hemispheres simultaneously better. And you know when that bridge matures? When we're in our 50s. It doesn't get to its maximum growth until we're in our 50s, which means that we problem solve differently as we get older. When we have a problem to solve, we don't just tend to use one side of our brain over the other. We have both of them engaged more fully. And so we can problem solve from different perspectives. And isn't it true that as we get older, we can see life isn't as black and white, it's very gray. We see the subtleties, we see the exceptions, the what ifs. And that's what's important about having like older adults and younger adults together on work teams, because the younger adult brain can come up with the really fast ideas and the older adult brain can say, that's a good idea, but we may have to be careful about this possibility happening. That's why you need both brains on work teams. They are the most productive intergenerational teams. So that's another brain skill we've got. We can problem solve from many different perspectives. We can put ourselves in the place of someone else more easily than when we were younger. Also, we have sharper information discrimination ability. We know better and faster and more accurately what piece of information is important and relevant and what piece of information you could throw out when you do a task. So we know the shortcuts. We've had experience going through the shortcuts. Oh, you don't need to do that. You could just go right to doing this. So that's another really good brain skill. And then also we have greater emotional regulation because we've gone through so many different experiences in our lives that when we're hit with something that's very negative, we are better able to see it as not as bad as when we experience it younger. Recently, a study done by Laura Carstensen found that older adults are actually better going through COVID, this whole pandemic situation, than younger people. We have this kind of perspective that we are able to cope a little bit better because we can see that we can regulate our emotions, and our brains actually change to do that. They allow us to do that. So those are some of the good things in our heads going on.
I just love that, because all we ever focus on, and I'm guilty of this, is the negative of the aging. However, I appreciate where I'm at more so than when I was in my 30s. I am so much more sensible.
Right.
I make so many more better decisions that are, better for me as well as better for my neighbors or my friends or whomever I'm around. I'm more patient, and I think we all have tendencies to grow in those different characteristics or what have you. But there was something I wanted to ask you because I thought that was so intriguing, because is there something that you can, I think what at least when I talk with older people or my older friends or what have you, some of us have a tendency, and including me, I admit, I can get cranky, I can.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on handling being cranky?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind that there are cranky children, there are cranky teenagers, and there are cranky middle-aged people too. So being cranky is not the purview of solely of the older adult. Okay, all of us can get cranky.
Thank you.
So that's so let's keep that in mind. But one of the things that when we feel despondent or cranky, or a lot of it is that we're responding to how our society is limiting us, that we don't have the chances. We still feel energized. We still have a purpose. We still want to do things. We want to be productive in a different way. One of the problems in our society is it seems to demand that we stay productive as if we were a middle-aged person. And that seems to deny all the brain attributes that I just described. It's like, no, I don't want to be treated like a middle-aged person. I want to be seen that I have other things to contribute. So why don't we redefine contribution and productivity for older adults in a different way? One of the people who did this beautifully is a woman named Maggie Kuhn. She was the founder of the Grey Panthers back in the 1970s. That's an organization that actually was always intergenerational, that was advocating for civil rights of other people. But she believed that there were 5 basic roles that older adults can play. So here's what she thought they could be. They could be mentors who teach the young, mediators who resolve civil, racial, and intergenerational conflict, monitors of public bodies who serve as watchdogs of City Hall and Congress, mobilizers of social change, and motivators of society who urge people away from self-interest and toward the public good. So think about those kind of roles: mentors, mediators, monitors, mobilizers, and motivators. These are the kinds of things we can be, and we can be better at the older that we get. So we should be used in that way. A lot of times as we get older, we have more time. We have more time to attend City Hall and meetings, or we have more time to work for nonprofits and help, or sit on the boards of trustees, things like that. Now, those were Maggie Kuhn's 5 roles, but then I started to think, what about people who have severe dementia or are disabled and can't in some way, shape, or form fill out, do any of those other roles? Is there no job for them? And I thought, yes, there's a job that can be mirrors and models of aging. How do we treat people as they get older? With someone with severe dementia, how do we treat that person? Do we treat that person as a child? Or do we treat that person as if there is a viable older adult in there somewhere with a history that's due respect and dignity? So all of us, no matter our capacity level, we have jobs that we can be fulfilling, but society has got to have those constructs that will give us those opportunities to do those kinds of things. So that's why we need to work against this ageism that permeates our society. And the ironic thing is, of all the isms, ageism is the one we are all vulnerable to because we're all getting older. You know, not all of us are vulnerable to sexism or racism or homophobia or ableism, but we're all vulnerable to ageism. So if we don't solve it now, our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, they're going to have to deal with it as well. So that's why I'm such an advocate about changing people's minds about aging and disrupting ageism.
Well,
Things we could do about that.
Well, yes, and I love that. I love you've inspired me. Let me put it that way. Yeah, I mean it's so heartfelt and it's so real because it's so true.
Right.
So thank you, Jeanette. I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show today. I may have you back because I think this is a wonderful topic and there's so much more to talk about, especially that part around framing our assets, our personal assets in such a way of either giving back, finding a job, or just enjoying life more.
Right.
You know, I think that in itself would be a great topic. So if you're willing to come back, I'd love to talk about it.
Would love it. Thank you.
And can you tell me or tell our audience how to find you online?
Sure. I have a website. My website is JeanetteLeardi.com. And so it's JeanetteLeardi.com. And on it, you'll see I have a blog called Ageful Living, and you could read what I write about aging as well.
Great. And for you audience that's listening, I promise to put the Jeanette's link and to her website where you will find her blog. So please visit Jeanette there. And again, thank you audience for visiting today. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel and share this particular video with a friend. And thank you, Jeanette. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carol. It was a pleasure.